Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Mayor Ras J. Baraka, all Newark school leaders, principals, and vice principals brunch, and that's where you make some noise. Woo! We are so excited that you are here today, and we know that there are people that's still on the line. We want to thank you so much. This is a public safety building, and so they're making sure that we're all safe. So let's give it up for everybody that's involved in keeping us safe. Come on, let's just give them some love. Just want to give you an overview. My name is Dr. Sharnae Brown. I want to welcome you to this event, and I represent the Mayor's Office, the specific education office, which is named the Office of Comprehensive Community Education. And we are really excited that you're here today, and this is an office that doesn't necessarily exist in every mayoral office, but this is something that's a high priority for our mayor. We know Mayor Ras J. Baraka is an educator by trade. Woo! I say that because there are many spaces where people don't respect what you do. And I want you to know that you are in a space where you're well respected, because the mayor and myself, we are educators by trade, and we've had every position. For me, I think the mayor too, substitute teacher, yes, substitute teacher, department chair, vice principal, and principal of schools. So let's just give it up for us for doing what. And we're here, and the mayor will talk clearly about this, but I'm just giving the brief overview. We're here because, quite frankly, you guys are extremely important. There is not an objective in this city that educators aren't attached to it. We understand that our success is wrapped up in our educational system. And we know that there's a big ask that's put on your shoulders every single day, and we want to make sure that we're doing our part. The mayor is passionate specifically about the principals this event here, because he wants to make sure that you feel loved. You understand that City Hall is a partner in your work. Never are we in your work involved to shout you out or talk about you or talk negatively. That is not our platform. Our platform is to support. And the mayor wants to make sure every single school in his city is safe, equitable, and has a high standard of excellence. That is his vision. And so we're here today to impart, to inform, and to celebrate with some good food. And so I'm so excited about our chef today. I also want to give her a shout out because our chef today is actually a teacher in Newark school system. So let's give it up for Chef Ty Clark and the students of Marion P. And you are in for a treat, so we are excited about how we're just celebrating educators. And even though some of the decorations, I just want to shout out, is another educator. Her name is Devon Sally. She used to work at Arts High School, so let's give it up for Devon Sally. We have educators all over this thing. And our office specifically has 3 pillars, and I'm going to briefly talk about them in really 60 seconds. We have 3 major categories that we lay our hat on. The first one is educational equity. And that equity that we're talking about does not come from our office. It actually comes because we use the educational equity framework, which puts the stakeholders at the center of that design. And very specifically, our office is here to hear what barriers you're going through and to make sure that we can make tools as equity as possible, but you are also a part of that solution. The second pillar that our office represents is literacy and social capital. Aren't we building up our young people to take high high positions in this city and to lead us, because quite frankly, even though we're doing great, we're not going to be in these seats all the time. And we have to be able to pass the baton to our young people who we educated and be assured that they are quite capable and qualified to take our positions and to do far better than we've done because the foundation we laid. And the last pillar is to create policy. How can we be a policy lab in order to hear what you are going through and to remove barriers that's in our school system? Any school that thinks that they don't have barriers are struggling with an equity problem. Because as great as we think we are, sometimes we create unintended barriers, and our families are the ones navigating these systems, and there should be something systematic to make sure that they have access to us to tell us how their lived experiences are. So I am not going to take a whole bunch of time. We have a great amount of speakers and presentations. We're going to do a lot of work on literacy. We have some great literacy experts in the room. I just want to shout them out, so thank you so much. We have Montclair University and Rutgers University. Can we give those universities a hand? And if you're alumni, make extra noise. But we also have some great people here that's going to give us, even though they're going to be making brief announcements, these are important announcements that's coming down the pike, and we want to make sure that you have access to them, so you'll hear about it from here first. So I am going to move out the way soon, because I know that time is on our side if we use it correctly, and so I don't want to take too much time. But I still hear a little echo. Is that me? Do you hear it as well? Not as bad? Okay, I'll suffer if you're good. All right, that's no problem. All right, but we're going to move on, and I think it's extremely befitting to hear from Mayor J. Baraka, who is our mayor, the leader of the city, and I believe, hold up, before the mayor comes, Mayor, can I announce some other people that's in the room? Is that okay? I see the Superintendent Leon is in the room. Can you come up and just say hi? Let's give it up for Superintendent of Newark Board of Education. We thank you that he stopped by on a Saturday. He's probably looking to make sure we're loving on you really good.
Good morning. Good morning. That's it? Good morning. Good morning. Oh my goodness. Let's give a big round of applause to our mayor. This annual event of bringing everyone together is so important for so many reasons. I'm so tired right now. Last night, we had the North 1 Group 2 Sectional Championship, and Malcolm X Shabazz football team won. We got home very late. Oh my goodness. The guys did such an incredible job. Their story is our story. They were in Group 1 last year, and if you know anything about sports in New Jersey, it's based on enrollment, and the enrollment was smaller then. And it's not that it has gotten so much greater today, but the NJSIAA, which governs over sports in New Jersey, wound up changing the rules. And as a result, put them with schools that have hundreds of more athletes and students who attend them. And so just like us here in the city, the rules often change, and we become what apparently appears to be to others underdogs. And just like Malcolm X Shabazz last night, we seek the challenge, we seek to understand it, we seek to flip it on its head and make improvements from it. And I thought that was somewhat symbolic of what occurred last night, and given the fact that we're having this meeting this morning. The mayor and Dr. Brown clearly know that leadership in the schools is extremely important. The principals that are here in the room from the district understand that I've repeatedly shared that it is definitely the second hardest job in the school system. I have Assistant Superintendent Bronco, Assistant Superintendent Lot Velez. For them, vice principals, department chairpersons, all of those that support the schools. I definitely appreciate you being here because your work is all too important. The principalship is a hard job all by itself. No one can deny that. I've seen the mayor, under the most stressful of situations, always claim that it's his principalship, his learnings in the Newark Public Schools as a student, eventually through the leadership role that he holds today, that has helped him make important decisions. I dare to say to everyone in this room that if going alone is hard, then us going together is going to be harder, but that collaboration will be so much richer in the end. Have a great morning, have a great day. Proud of you.
All right, we're going to do some shout outs all throughout the day, and so because there's great people in the room, I also want to say that every school type is represented. The district just spoke. If you represent charter, stand up and wave and represent charter. And we're going to shout you out once I go down there and see who's in the room. If you represent faith-based schools, stand up and come on, some faith-based schools. Yes, yes. If you're representing the county, is the county in the room? Oh, we normally have county representatives. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to call Principal Janubu and make sure he gets here. But we're gonna represent, we're gonna get started. And again, I'm going to invite the one and only Honorable Mayor Raz J. Baraka to come talk about his vision for schools in the city. Let's give it up for our mayor.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to thank Dr. Brown first. Let's give Dr. Brown. Consummate, tireless worker who makes everything cheery, that's for sure. She ain't never gonna stop that. But you guys are in the William Mobile Ashby Community Care and Wellness Center. Just want to make sure you know. Even though people say it's a police building, it's a public building, so you all have access to it whenever you want. There is a woman out there, where is she, who is the director of this facility, who's not a police officer, by the way. She a Latina Bird, who is a firefighter who runs this building every single day. It was named William Mobile Ashby because William Mobile Ashby is the first African-American social worker in the entire state of New Jersey. He was also instrumental in the Urban League, the founding of the Urban League here. He was also instrumental in the founding of United Way of Greater Essex here. And he's also a member of the greatest fraternity in the world, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. This is why we named it after him. So Police Academy trains here, so does the Fire Academy. We also have doula training here. We also train social workers here. We also do outreach training for folks who are involved in CVI work or community violence intervention work are here, as well as a myriad of community programming and things that happen in this building. So that's why we named it community care, right? So everybody that's involved in making sure our community is cared for and wellness is at the center of the work that they do, use this building for training, which means that you can use it for training because you are included in community care and wellness. I want you to keep that in mind when you're having programming, when you're doing things, even graduations or any other thing that you need, training for teachers, department chairs, anything you need to do. You can get in touch with Latina Bird here. You can reach out even to Dr. Brown. She can hook it up for you, make those relationships so that you are able to use this building when you need it for your school, right? and I'm sure people can make use of that, right? So it's a beautiful building paid for by taxpayer dollars, so make sure you use it for sure. We are focused on literacy, and that's in our mind the most important thing that we need to be focused on in the city as it relates to educational opportunity, but also it's the most important thing in my mind to make sure folks are centered around democracy. Literacy is important. You need a literate community in order for you to have an engaged community that's a part of a democratically and growing community here. So I also want to say that we are not choosing the path of least resistance. And many of us choose the path of least resistance because it's actually the natural inclination for you to go towards a place where there's less pain. You want to experience the least amount of pain as possible, or the least amount of stress as possible. Our natural inclination is to go to places that are more comfortable for us, right? And so what we want to do is make us a little uncomfortable, right? We want to create more discomfort because we know that change and transformation and growth only happens in the presence of stress. I know that sounds wild, but in the presence of stress and discomfort, that's how you get growth. In fact, when you're in the weight room, the more stress you put on your muscles, the quicker they are to grow. You need stress in order for that to happen. If you're lifting heavy weight, right, and the weight starts getting lighter to you, guess what it's time for you to do? Put more weight on. And when you put more weight on, you constantly grow. But we witness intermittent growth or no growth at all because we want least stress. And because we try to go towards the least path of resistance, we don't want resistance, we don't get the kind of incredible amount of growth that we're looking for because we're trying to move away from resistance as opposed to seeking resistance or seeking challenge or seeking weight, right? And then when you get too much weight, right, it's something called weight distribution. Meaning you should have people around you that you're able to distribute the weight on to help you move something forward. So if I'm under the bench with 225 pounds, I need a spotter, right? I need somebody behind me to help me guide that up, to make sure I got control of it completely. Usually our ego sometimes don't allow us to call for a spotter, and so when we don't have a spotter, sometimes the weight falls down on us and we can't lift it, and then we blame everybody else because we can't lift the weight that we knew was too heavy before we got under it. But because we know the weight is so heavy, we ought to get a spotter. We ought to get some help, and we ought to distribute it evenly to make it easier to lift. And the first way you do that is get rid of your ego. Right? Humiliate yourself, make yourself vulnerable and have a little humility so that you're able to get support and help around you. And the great thing about what we're doing is trying to give you support. We're trying to give you help. You know, sometimes when people offer to help you, you get upset because you think that means that they're saying you can't do this. Right? Some of us, we get that way. Like, we say, oh, let me help you. No, I got this. I got this. I don't need your help. Right? And you sitting there struggling with it, trying to get it up, you know. But ultimately, you probably need some support. And when you get the support, you can actually get it up. And it helps you do that over and over and over again until you're able to do it on your own. And now it's time to put heavier weight on. A lot of times we get to 225. When I got a chance to lift 225, I probably lifted it every day and put videos up and bragging myself that I can do this. Oh, look, I got this. You know, people say, oh, I'm lifting this heavy weight. But we turn the video off when they put the extra pound on it because I can't get that. So we show off with the 225. But when the other weight get on, we like to go and do that in secret, right? But ultimately, whatever the goals that we're trying to get, right, we need to make sure that many of us are involved in it as possible because the weight of making sure that our children in Newark are literate is heavyweight. Is heavy, heavy, heavyweight. It's not easy. There are some teachers and principals in other districts and other places who are having a grand time, whose names and schools are on USA Today and all of these other things. They're showing off how great they can lift 225 pounds, right? But as soon as you put more weight on that, it gets a little heavier for them, right? So I would argue that some of those people could not lift the weight that you have to lift in Newark every day. That the things that they're lifting, while heavy, are certainly not as heavy as the weight that you have to lift here. Which means you actually need more support, not less. It means you need more support. And that's really all we're trying to do here, is give you the opportunity to get the support that you need so you can lift heavy weight. And I've been saying this data point over and over again since I learned it, almost in every talk that I give, that between Newark and Livingston, which is 8 miles apart from one another, I can get there on my bicycle, there's a life expectancy difference of 14 years. 14. So the work that you're doing, you're actually adding years to people's lives. And when we don't do it well, we actually perpetuate that life expectancy difference. So just the seriousness of the work that you are doing. And I'm going to tell you how possible it is. November 14th, a couple of days ago, or was it yesterday, was the day that Ruby Bridges, 60-something years ago, desegregated a school in Louisiana. She went to school in a classroom by herself at 6 years old. The teacher taught her, and only her, in her class for an entire year. She had to be escorted to school by U.S. Marshals. There's a great painting by Norman Rockwell that's entitled "The Problem We All Live With." Ruby Bridges, you know that story that many of us don't teach in school. In some places now it might be illegal. But to teach that story about a young, resilient girl at 6 who, in those circumstances and conditions, graduated, went on to be a philanthropist, an activist, a civil rights activist, national, with high self-esteem, literate and articulate individual in that environment, right? Speaks volumes to that individual teacher who raised her hand when everybody else refused to teach her and said, "I'll do it." And so every day we're raising our hands here and saying, "We'll do it." That's what we're doing. We're saying, "I'll do it. Choose me. Send me. I'll do it." That's what we're saying. I'll do it. In the middle of all of this, I'll do it. In the middle of what goes on in people's households, in our community, I'll do it. Or the kids who came to school, the next day after their father died, their mother died, their siblings died, and you taught them anyway, you raised your hand and said, "I'll do it." When kids come to school hungry without clothes in homes that had no heat, that were evicted the night before, you raised your hand and said, "I'll do it," right? I'll do it. Or they live in a project that's been raided the night before and they meant to come to school on that Monday and act like everything is cool and normal, or they're in a situation where they're growing up where domestic violence is real, you raising your hand and saying, "I'll do it." Every day, that's what you're doing, right? And so I applaud you for that. But I want us to know that, the work that we're doing is incredibly, incredibly important and urgent. I don't want you to belittle it. And literacy at the center of that is so important. And I mentioned Ruby Bridges, right, to set the stage and the context, but also to let you know we need to be teaching Ruby Bridges. I don't know who y'all voted for. And this is not a political discussion. And you vote for whoever you want to vote for, right? But the reality of the matter to me, if we want democracy, we actually have to teach it. If we want fairness, we actually have to teach it. If we want equity, we actually have to teach it. If we want justice, we actually have to teach it. If we want people to be treated properly, we actually have to teach that. If we want people to have some kind of empathy, we have to actually teach that. We want them to care for everybody, we actually have to teach that. And we can teach that through literacy. We can teach those concepts through literacy. Through literacy, we can teach those concepts. We could teach Robert Smalls. Born a slave in the Carolinas who stole a ship from the Confederacy, dressed up like one of the masters and stole a ship with 17 people on it, made his wife meet him at a rendezvous point and their children and picked them up and went into the Union side and turned the ship over and got Congress to pay him for the ship. They paid him for the ship, and when later on, when slavery was over after the Civil War, he went and bought his master's house and moved in. This is a great American story. Not only did he do that, he ran for office in the Carolinas and was a state legislature. He was an assembly person and a senator, and later represented the state as a congressperson in Reconstruction. This is a man that represents the vitality of the American dream. He represents the promise of what America can offer. A person who used all his resources to make himself free other people, and then represent the same community that was enslaved. Now, I wonder if he knew how to read. That's where that goes. I wonder if he actually could put a sentence together and knew how to read. I wonder if Frederick Douglass knew how to read. I wonder what did literacy do to empower them, right? That's our task here today. So I appreciate you guys coming out. I always like talking to school leaders, because I still fancy myself as one. And what Superintendent Leon said is true. All of the pain that I received as a principal has visited me well as a mayor, or like some of my old students say, the principal of the city. Some of those skills that I learned as a principal are incredibly transferable to the job that I'm doing now. So I appreciate you, and I would say stay at it. We need your help and support, and I would love to see you guys use this facility and use this building for your well-being. Thank you.
Come on, let's give it up for the mayor of this great city, Mayor J. Baraka. Just incredibly excited about the work that he's been doing, and one of the things that I'm really excited about is the work around collaboration. One thing that I love about working for Mayor J. Baraka is that he's solution-oriented, and he's not afraid of a good idea. And he has a good ego that if it's not his idea, I've always worked for him, and he always gave credit to those people that gave the idea. And I just think that that is amazing, because that's true leadership and that's true humility. And you can see that in the spirit of the collaboration that's solving great problems, problems around violence and public safety and sewer and lead, all the things that are tied to the well-being of our young people and their ability to sit in your classes and to learn. So I just want to thank Mayor. He's extremely humble. Let's give him another round of applause. And we're going to be hearing from him a lot, but we have some community partners that are here that is going to give us a very brief, and they're going to mull around and speak to you. And there's also information out, so I apologize that they didn't have a tremendous amount of time. But another great thing that we're going to have going on in this city is our young people being able to vote at the age of 16. Hold on, they told me to do this. And, uh-oh. Okay, hold on, I'm supposed to be doing this a long time ago. You see how behind I am? Don't. Okay, so but please, we want to introduce Ryan Haygood, and he has a wonderful, I'm okay? Okay, he has a wonderful, it's not just an initiative, it's a campaign because it already passed into law. So let's give it up for Ryan Haygood, the president and CEO of New Jersey Institute of Social Justice, to talk about our young people being able to vote in a very special election at the age 16. Ryan Haygood.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Charnay Brown. Good morning. Come on, y'all. Good morning. Good morning. It's so good to see you all and to share, as Dr. Brown nudged me, a few brief moments with you. About a year ago, my colleague, McCowry Vargas, who's in the back next to my other colleague, Asada Mann, was in conversation with some young folks in the city of Newark about two trends, right? One of them was sort of looking at what was happening nationally, is happening nationally around the attempt to prohibit students from learning the truth about such things as history and slavery and structural racism. You all are familiar with this, and book banning and more. That sort of national reality alongside the reality that in the last school board election, as you all know well, just 2.5% of registered adults turned out. So this attack on teaching the truth in classes alongside incredibly low, to put it charitably, participation in our school board election. So we came to Mayor Baraka asking whether he would be interested in championing the kind of work he already loves, which is empowering young people through lowering the age of voting to 16. My colleague McCowry had done some legal research, and she learned that our Constitution empowers cities to lower the voting age to 16 for school board elections. And so the mayor was enthusiastic about this. This became known as Vote 16, and the young people, along with the mayor and partners, began to talk to each of our city council members about this exciting initiative. Newark would be the first such city to pass such an ordinance. And this culminated, this culminated in a hearing in December where young people en masse turned out to testify in support of this measure. I just want to share with you really briefly what one of the young people, then 16-year-old Nate, a high school student here in the city, testified. So the then City Council President LaMonica McIver, now Congressman McIver, invited public participation. Nate gets up to go speak, but before he can get to the microphone, there was an adult who's pretty prominent and regular in the city council meetings who got to the mic before him. And she said something like, you know, I know all these young people here, some of them not from the city, though that was capped because most of them were from the city. These young people are going to advocate for the right to vote at 16. And what they need to be focusing on instead is why they can't read. True story. Why they can't write. Why they can't do basic addition, mathematics. Like, that is what they should be focusing on. And it was an attempt, obviously, to preempt what the young people would say. But it turned out, to use a really bad sports analogy, Rob Clark, that she literally put the ball like right by the rim for our guy, Nate, who came second. And at 16, he's a beautiful young man. He wears glasses. That's important because before he started speaking, he pushed the glasses up on his face, right? And he said something like, with respect to the adult who testified first, in the last school board election, less than 3% of adults turned out to vote. And so he said, so it's clear to me, it's clear to us that we simply can't rely on other people to speak for us. That we have to do for ourselves. And I want to lift that up, particularly the mayor mentioned it, in light of national elections, including a recent presidential election. about just this morning what one author said when he wrote the New York Times. Out of the wreckage of this election, we must reject the impulse to simply be a resistance that condemns whatever Donald Trump says. While confronting what he says, we must also focus on ourselves, what we stand for, and how we will tell our story. We need to articulate an alternative vision for what kind of democracy we want. And what I love about this moment, as painful as it will no doubt be, is that this is a from the ground up moment. And we know that power is always built from the ground up in our communities. And in the city of Newark, we're the first city that will extend this right to vote to 16 and 17-year-olds to participate in the election that matters most directly to them. And so I'm almost done, Dr. Brown. So I want to say this to you all. The mayor has been convening a series of meetings with our team, folks from the district, and we need your help. Next April, there will be this historic election in which 7,000 new voters will have access to the franchise. 90% of them will be black and brown. They'll be able to register to vote on February the 1st. They can register in New Jersey now online to simplify the way that registration happens. The mayor and our organization and others, we're going to host a town hall about which we have information in the back. And we invite you to come. This will be the first day they can register. But ahead of February, we need you school leaders to help us push into high schools to register as many 16 and 17-year-olds as possible, beginning that preparation now. So I want to lift up, you just look in the back, my colleagues, Macari Vargas and Asada Mann, they're right there in the back. They're leading this work for us. We have materials and a sign-in sheet. We really want you to help us identify a leader in your school that we can connect with to plug into these, what are they, Asada, Macari, weekly, bi-weekly meetings where we're building the community infrastructure to begin to empower our young folks in the schools to know about this right that will come their way. And the last thing I'll say as I close, we have had some adults who've asked the most obvious question, which is, if you enfranchise several thousand young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, what will it do to the Newark School Board? What will it do to the Newark School Board? And I know, not you all, but other people, other adults outside the room are really worried about what it could mean for the composition, because if we get honest, New Jersey has been a machine politician state. And too often elections are decided even before a single vote is cast. Y'all got real quiet on that one. Too often elections in New Jersey are decided even before a single vote is cast. And what I love about this opportunity is we finally will be giving those impacted most by these elections a say in democracy. And that, for me, is what democracy looks like. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you. Thank you.
Okay, just to lift up some things, there are materials in the back, and that election that they will be able to do that is happening April 15th, 2025. So from February 1st to a certain amount of time, I'm pretty sure they'll tell you they'll be able to register. So thank you so much, Ryan Haygood. I have 2 more community partners that's coming here and giving us some great information. Again, they have materials out, so I'm going to announce both of them at this time so they can follow one after the other. We're going to introduce an initiative that you guys are very familiar with, FAFSA. We're going to introduce Ryan Ince, the Executive Director of Newark City of Learning Collaborative, NCLC, and she's going to talk about us in Newark. This is important stuff, especially my high school principals. Updates around FAFSA. We know last year it was terrible, right? And so this is wonderful. She's been doing a lot of work, working on prototypes to make sure that this particular FAFSA season goes much smoothly. So come on, Robin Ince, and talk to us, these principals, and maybe you need this information for your own child if you have an elementary school, Robin Ince. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Good morning, everyone. I won't be before you long, but just to piggyback on what Dr. Brown said, last year's FAFSA experience was humbling. But what is wonderful, and in keeping with the theme of what we've heard this morning, because of the leadership of the superintendent, because of you all's leadership, and because of the vision of Mayor Baraka, Newark actually won the FAFSA challenge that the mayor had, the mayor's FAFSA challenge, won the FAFSA challenge. Many of your schools won that. And it continued its leadership in having the highest number of FAFSAs completed and submitted for the state. It was a higher percentage than the state and a higher percentage than the United States of America. And that is because of you all's leadership, so I want you to give yourselves a round of applause. Newark City of Learning Collaborative really works hand in hand with all of you all here and with partners across the city to help increase the number of people in Newark who have a college degree or credential. And what I want to lift up today is that we just got hot off the presses from one of our partners, which is HESA, that runs the FAFSA program for and all the state grants for the state of New Jersey. We found out yesterday that the FAFSA will actually be released earlier than projected. It is going to be released on November 22nd. That is something, and he encourages everyone to just start doing the FAFSA as soon as it's released November 22nd. We already are in a leadership position in that more than 400 Newark students have already completed the FAFSA. And for those students who are from families that are undocumented, Newark is leading in that more than 300 applications have been completed in the New Jersey alternative application, which opened for undocumented students more than a month ago. 70% of those are from Newark. The thing that I hear a lot about FAFSA is that the reluctance to complete it, even though it is now a state requirement with an opt-out option, the concern is often around loans. Two things I want to lift up about that. One is that in addition to the option of the federal loans, HESA actually has a loan which has better terms and actually is a better rate for New Jersey residents. The other thing, and this points to information that's out on the table, is that the FAFSA, as many of you all know, unlocks money. I've put on the table information about HESA so that you all can learn about information or have the magazines from HESA about all the various scholarships that are available. One of those scholarships now accrues to vocational students going to vocational school, so the FAFSA applies to that. There's another scholarship that the governor has that applies toward community college. And just yesterday I learned from working with a young man that I met on a college campus that there is the governor's urban scholarship. We couldn't understand why he didn't get it because he was in the top 5% of his class. But what we learned is that HESA expects that people in the schools are going to upload that information into the system so that they can qualify for the money. The thing that was wonderful about this young man is even though he started college, it's not too late for him to qualify for that scholarship. So a couple of things that we're unlocking. There is a new scholarship that has just been announced last year. There were 50 scholarships across the state of New Jersey that could have been awarded. Unfortunately, we didn't get all of them, and that money had to go to another state. So today, I've put flyers out, and we've shared this with many of the school counselors that we meet with and that the district meets with. But the scholarship is called the Fidelity Scholars Program. That money is a last dollar scholarship, and it is unlocked after people apply for the FAFSA, which is why it's important to apply for that funding. This last dollar scholarship is awarded to students who are in that middle cohort of students. So anyone who has a 2.5 to a 3.5 unweighted GPA qualifies for this scholarship, and they can be students who are between the ages of 18 and 24. So if you graduated from high school and you haven't gone, but you want a chance to go to college, 4-year or 2-year, this scholarship is available for students. It's administered by UNCF, and our goal this year is to work in partnership with you and with UNCF to ensure that they can actually award 50 scholarships. It goes to New Jersey students who are going to go to school in New Jersey. And what we've learned from research is that about 80% of the students who graduate from Newark wind up staying in New Jersey. So the Fidelity Scholarship information is out there, in addition to other information about the Jackie Robinson Scholarship, the Cooperman College Scholars Program, and information about scholarships that are available through UNCF, the United Negro College Fund. That fund actually awards 42% of its funding in New Jersey goes to students who are going to school in New Jersey. So that funding isn't just for HBCU students, it's for students of various racial backgrounds who are just trying to get an opportunity to go to school. So all of that information is available. I thank you for this time to lift up the hot off the presses news that FAFSA is opening next Friday. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much, Robin, for all the wonderful work that you do, not just for NCLC, but you're also a professor at Rutgers, and so just thank you for being an educator at heart and pushing us and our young people to get the money that they deserve in order to go to school. Before we get into this whole literacy piece that we're working on, we have one more community partner. She is so excited about this work, and I'm so excited to introduce Vivian Frazier Cox, who's going to talk to us about this literacy lab. And to me, it's so fitting that we're doing it here. We're talking about it here because William Mobile Ashby created one of the founders of the Urban League, and she is the president and CEO of the Urban League. So thank you for coming by and telling us about the great thing that's coming down the pipe.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a great day, and I'm excited to be here. I'm Vivian Cox Frazier. I'm president and CEO of the Urban League of Essex County. And as Dr. Brown mentioned, we were founded by William Ashby, who the mayor mentioned was the first black social worker in New Jersey. And we have a series, we are a community service and community development organization. Our mission is to advance economically African American families and other disadvantaged minorities. We execute our mission through program services, bridge building, and advocacy. We have a range of services and programs from infants and toddlers, workforce development. We also do housing counseling, financial counseling, and we build housing too. So, but today I'm here, and since I'm last added to the agenda, I'm going to be brief. But Ryan mentioned something that made me remember maybe my first reaction when I heard 16-year-olds were going to vote. I probably was like the person that came and spoke at that city council meeting. But I think the latest election, and certainly what we see when young people come into the Urban League, it's heartbreaking sometimes to have high schoolers come in, can't complete applications, can't write essays, can't do things like that. And I tell you right, I'm 65 years old, and I ain't dying at the Urban League, I'm just saying. But I am interested in the legacy of the Urban League. And I began to think about, I was going to build a child care center. So if you know where the Ambassador Chicken was, if you drive there now, you'll see some construction going on. And I'm going to say the Urban League is building a literacy center there. And the goal is to figure out what is it going to take. The simple question we're involved in right now is, what is it going to take to get the 12-year-old to put down the phone and pick up a book. I don't know what it is. But I do know the power of literacy and the power of writing. And I know that we're at a critical juncture right now. When those third grade reading scores came out, I don't know how you felt, but I felt like, oh my God, this is a crisis, right? And I want to applaud the educators, the principals. You're here every day, you're doing this work. But what dawned on me at that point was that it's going to take all of us. As Amir said, this is bigger than the schools. It's bigger than that. It is a community issue, and I think it's time for the community, our community collectively, to own the literacy of our kids. I really believe that. I mean, we do a lot of work around the racial wealth gap, building home ownership, financial capability, and I really started to think the biggest determination of that wealth gap is literacy. Can you read? We have young people coming in to take certification tests. We have to give them remedial work first before they can even pass a TABE test at 8th grade reading level to qualify for certification programs. So we can talk about a lot of structural barriers and things like that. But the Literacy Center is going to be about a 9,000 square foot space. We are engaged in a listening program now and a design process. So we have sessions with young people, kids. We want to know what's inspiring them, what will get them to want to pick up a book. What is the theme? And I have a book that's my inspiration. And it's, so people say, is it a library? No. Is it a tutoring center? No. This book is called Unnecessarily Beautiful Spaces for Young Minds on Fire. And so that's what we're trying to do. Ignite a fire in our children that they want to succeed and to create the opportunity for them to have the tools to do so. So the center will have professional development for teachers as well, and also for parents and family to come in and figure out what materials do their children need. And one of the key things I want to have is I want to be able to have any parent be able to come there with their child and have their child assessed. Straight, you know, this is where your child is. Because sometimes the tests are very confusing, you don't know what it is, and many parents are struggling, they're rushing. You know, they feel like if the child comes home, they got decent grades, I'm not getting any complaints. They're basically like, oh, it's all good, I can worry about all the 50 other things I've got to deal with. And I know that feeling, because when I grew up, my parents would just say, go to school, do what the teacher said. If my father showed up at school, I was in trouble, I knew. And now there's this whole idea that parents have to be in the school, have to show up every day to show that they care. And I'm saying, I know and I believe our community, our parents want our children to be successful, want their children to be successful, but it's going to take all of us. So the Literacy Center, we have I left material out there for it. As I said, we're doing a listening campaign. We'd love to have your schools involved. It's not any specific age. It's going to go from pre-K all the way to high school. So whatever school you're a principal of, if you're interested in participating, interested in hosting us, we're happy to come to talk about it. We are in design phase right now, and the center will open probably January 2026, but if you drive by, construction has started. As I said, the Literacy Center is ground floor, be 70 units of affordable housing above, and I think, as Amir said, it's going to take all of us. It's a big weight, but as Ryan mentioned, even with the election, you think about the kids and everybody watching all these messages they're getting on their phone. Don't know what's fake, don't know what's real. What's the difference? Are you literate? Can you discern and understand and you know, figure out the difference? And so that's the goal of the Literacy Center. I hope you'll all participate. I'm free to talk to any of you about it. There's some flyers out there, certainly. Happy to come out. The other thing is I'm looking for a leader to lead this Literacy Center. So you may know someone who is interested, someone who's enthusiastic. One, you got to be excited and enthusiastic. But the center will have 3 domains. It'll be reading, writing, and theater. You know, so, and the theater is there. I really, as my own self, I was in they used to have anti-poverty programs. I tell this a lot, anti-poverty programs, and I was in one. I was in something called the Urban Arts Theatrical Ensemble when I was about 12 years old. And when I see my friends from that time, we still can quote and recite poems from Paul Laurence Dunbar, Langston Hughes. We could orate Frederick Douglass's speech, because that's what we learned in there. And one of the main things we had to do in the theater program, we had to read. And so really we think it's a great way to engage kids, engage our community. So I hope you'll participate. There's some flyers out there. And again, I'm Vivian Cox Fraser. I'm at the Urban League. Just reach out. I'm accessible anytime. Thank you. Oh, I was going to say, should I introduce the next person?
Thank you so much, Vivian Fraser Cox. I'm sorry, that was a little tongue twister. Give it up for the President and CEO of Urban League, and we thank you for coming to the community to ask young people and families what they want, what resources that they want. This next section of our program is extremely important. A lot of times, and I know this as an educator, there's a lot that's being asked for you to do. And I know as every educator, you might be in the principal seat or vice principal seat, but you have a specialty. You went to school for something very specific. And then you have to become an instructional leader and make sure all of it is done well. So we thought it would be extremely important to have people who specialize in literacy to give us just some support and then even have access to them. You'll see that not only would you have their information in their bios, but we're also going to have a Q&A section where you actually can ask questions, talk about your problems. This is a safe space, and get support and even help getting them to lead some professional development or going to school yourself. Those flyers are actually in here. And we have 3 leading experts. 2 of them are going to give a presentation, and one of them is going to talk about legislation that's extremely important that's coming down the pike that I think all of us need to be aware of because it will impact our schools. So we're going to introduce the first speaker, who's going to give us kind of like this information that we need to get us moving on why we need to focus on literacy. Oh, it's actually on point. Why we can focus on literacy so importantly. Let's give it up for Dr. Michelle Macchia, who's going to give us a talk. And write down your questions because we're going to have an opportunity. And we thank Rutgers University for being here, one of our great anchor partners as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Macchia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Can you all hear me okay? Can you hear me? All right. Good morning. How are we? Good. It's very heartwarming to be in this crowd this morning, to be with you this morning. There's just been this message that has been consistent. It's been the through line in every single person's talk that they've given. And I'm happy to hear all of that, and I'm glad that what I'm thinking about as it relates to literacy learning in the city of Newark, that I'm on point with what I'm going to say. So first, I want to give a couple of thank yous, a few thank yous. I want to thank Mayor Baraka for his leadership and his vision. Yeah, give it up. Because this is tremendous work. It is very clear, and I've always known this, that he has a very clear vision for supporting the youth of the city. And he's right. Literacy is a social justice issue, and that our youth are the future. So thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank Dr. Brown, right, the Chief Education Officer of the Office of Comprehensive Community Education. I'm going to call this OCCE going forward because that's a mouthful. But thank you for bringing us together today to talk about the most important facet of education and success beyond the school-age years, and that is literacy. And then finally, I want to thank everyone who showed up this morning. I know it's early. I know that we've had late nights and hard work weeks, but I just want to thank all of you education leaders for the hard work that you do each and every day to ensure that Newark's children learn. And with that, I'm going to move into my talk. Okay. So, my name is Michelle Macchia, and I'm a teacher educator. And sometimes people say, okay, well, what does that even mean? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like, right? And I'm looking at my folks from Montclair. You know what this means. It is a person who educates other educators. I work specifically with pre-service teachers at Rutgers Graduate School of Education. And there, my work falls into 3 buckets. I do clinical supervision of our teacher candidates who are working in every single subject area from preschool all the way up through 12th grade. I supervise them, and I make sure that they become, at the end of the process, at the end of their time with us, the best person prepared to do the hardest work. I also teach. I design courses for our pre-service teachers, and I also have the great honor and the privilege of teaching those courses. I teach specifically a course called Literacy Development in the Early Years. I've been teaching that. I started in 2018, and so I've been teaching that course from the very beginning. I also teach a really interesting course called Students, Communities, and Social Justice. And I have designed a version of that that does just that. It helps our pre-service teacher candidates understand the connection between students we teach, the communities in which they live, and this whole notion of social justice, which is critical. It is a critical part, and we're learning that even more today with the recent results of the election. And then the third bucket of my work is around service. So I do things like create relationships with community partners, that's districts and community action organizations. I also show up and I do things like this today. So these are the things that I do in my work. And I kind of like, if there were an equation to sum up what I do, my work is all about early literacy, community engaged teaching and learning, as well as equity. So how did I get here? Well, started out as a teaching fellow working in 2 top private schools in California. I'm from California. I've been here for about 21 years in New Jersey. And I was working in these private schools, and there was something very particular going on. They were college prep private schools, top notch. People who were stars, they sent their children to the one school that I worked in Santa Monica. It's called Crossroads Elementary School. And there was a very specific culture around learning that took place in these schools. And I found that very fascinating. So that's where I got my start. I then moved into public schools in California. I was the founding teacher of a community day school, which was essentially a classroom, a multi-age classroom where students who were having difficulties in the mainstream setting, they were sent there to work with me so that we could get them on track and provide the appropriate supports for them. Then when I moved to New Jersey, I really very fortunately fell into a teaching job as a 3rd grade teacher. So I'm very much an elementary school teacher, and that's what I did for about maybe 10 years or so. And along that line, that process of being a 3rd grade teacher, I kept seeing the same stories over and over and over play out in my school. And it usually was something like this. There were students who were being referred for special services, and they all typically tended to have something in common. They were often Black, brown, students whose families were in poverty, but not always, and they were male. And I got tired of that narrative being pushed about those students. And so I started studying research and stuff on my own. But I also knew that in order to change that, I needed to do something more within my school system. And so I did things like develop the English language arts curriculum, I did summer school, I was on many different committees, I would teach workshops for the district's teacher academy, and then I eventually ended up leading the teacher academy. at that time, toward the end of my time with my school district, I started working on my doctorate. And boy, that was an education for me, because it helped me name all of the things I was seeing and feeling as an educator, all the things that frustrated me, but all of the things, the theories and approaches that gave me hope. And I knew there was something more. And so I persisted in my doctoral studies. And my research actually, I ended up doing something having to do with early literacy. How many early literacy folks do we have in here? Elementary school principals, right? So you know that guided reading is really important. Well, I was interested in understanding how teachers use this really important modality called discussion to assess students' understanding of what they're reading, and then engage them in a deeper dive into what they're reading so they could actually connect with the text and actually learn how to read and be excited about it. So that was what my doctoral research was about. And that led me to do some education consulting, which was around designing an professional development initiative around early literacy for teachers in New York City. And so it's all of that work together that really helped me just shape what I do today. That was a great preparation. So let me just share with you a very quick story. This is a story about how I got here. I started reading at the age of 4. And I remember it well. I remember sitting with my older sister as she did her homework. Sometimes I would sit near her just to be near her because it was comforting, and I looked up to her. And I would practice reading, and it was one of those old textbooks from the 1970s. It was a hardcover anthology with, a boy and a girl, and, the patterns in the text were predictive, the endings were predictable, there was lots of dialogue. I still remember the smell of the book and the feel of the pages of the book. And that experience in particular, it really left an indelible mark on my soul. It was this very intimate act of reading that I didn't at the time understand what it was, but now in this role, I understand what it was. And I understand how this whole intimate act of reading is really impressionable and so important for children to learn at a very early age. Reading was an integral part of my family's life. My mom, she worked part-time at a library, the local library, and so we spent a lot of time at the library. We would do our homework there, we would study there, we would hang around, just doing stuff, killing time until she got off of work. And then sometimes we would go to community events. She's told me this story many, many times. I don't actually remember it, but I feel like I was there. Once, the famous author Ezra Jack Keats, he visited our library in Cleveland, Ohio, for a reading of his book, The Snowy Day. Who remembers, you know that book, The Snowy Day, right? And so it's those experiences that set the trajectory for my literacy identity and my literacy legacy that I will leave. And just as my family, my school, and my community set the trajectory for my learning identity and legacy, Mayor Baraka and his OCCE team and the city's educators, all of you, are working to do the same for the children of Newark. So what I want to do with you right now is I want to drill down a little bit, because I have a question. Oops, sorry. What does it mean to engage in literacy equity work in service of the children of Newark? And I have 4 ideas that I'm going to share with you, and they're sort of multi-level, so stick with me. I'm going to try to throw some numbers in there and some sequencing language to help you follow me, because it's pretty rich and deep, but it's compact. First, it means that we must pause and celebrate and we're celebrating the wins because there are many in the city of Newark. Let me give you just a couple. People in this room right here, all of us, we represent a wide variety of Newark children, families, communities, and this really adds to our power. It's the plurality of the collective. Very important. Another win is that Mayor Baraka and his OCCE team, they've already begun to build a coalition around early literacy learning. They've done a bunch of things. I'm just going to name a few. They've got the 10-point literacy plan in which they sought input from various community stakeholders. That's critical. They have had the Cradle Project Conference, which focused on early pregnancy literacy, which is very real. There's also the Mayor's Book Club, right? Hashtag Newark Reads. That's just a few. I mean, even the fact that we're sitting here in this room today in the name of literacy, learning, and education, and social justice and equity, that's another thing. And there's so many, many more, and more to come. Another win, though, is that, and I want to give a shout out to Newark Public Schools. Newark Public Schools has made bold moves with its English language arts curriculum. And I'm talking specifically about something I call the Amistad units of study. I've worked with those units with some teachers in some schools in Newark as a part of a pilot project. And the thing that's striking about these units of study to me is that they center very vigorous thinking, speaking, reading, and writing in response to text. It's very rich. And they also use high-quality text to do that work. They use literature that acts as, you've heard this expression, mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors for children. That's what those units of study do. They are rich units. They are ambitious units. For anyone who's used them and seen them, you know they are very ambitious, but it's almost like, what the mayor talked about with the strength training. That's what those units actually do. It's a heavy lift. I hold them up everywhere I go as a fine example of equity-minded literacy, teaching, and learning. So those are the wins. My second thought is that we must remember, and I talk about this in the courses I teach, we must remember the historical context of literacy learning in the United States of America. I'm talking about the negative stuff, but I'm also talking about the positive aspects of it, some of the positive outcomes of it. So what are the negatives? We're talking about, and you know this, I see some head shaking here, we're talking about those really awful policies and laws that prevented, punished, and penalized marginalized folks for participating in literacy learning. It was against the law. It was something that my ancestors were not allowed to do, whether we were enslaved or not. It was something that was not just frowned upon, but it was punishable by death and any other horrible thing you can think of. That's one negative. Another negative was the strategic, and I'm stressing that word because it very much was intentional, the strategic structuring of education systems that were designed to exclude and deny marginalized folks. It excluded them from access to academic pursuits. Another negative is white mainstream societal norms. I'm just going to call a thing because history has shown that is what it is. We know that's what it is, that's what it was. Societal norms that determined who participated in democratic society. And it was a society that privileged literacy proficiency, and it privileged literacy practices. Those were all great things to do, but only for some people. They were performed in settings that were reserved for white folks only. So that leads me to the positives. So what were those positives? Well, as the mayor spoke of, anytime you're under pressure, it builds strength, it builds character, it builds and it sets the stage for the next thing, which is often more. And so the oppressed, they developed innovative practices. And I'll just name a couple of things. There were things like braiding maps into hair, coding messages through music and dance, quilting, storytelling, and so many other things. And all of those things I just named, those are forms of literacy. They are forms of writing. They are forms of expression that people used. And they persevered. And they used those things even at the risk of getting caught and punished and quite possibly and usually killed. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute because it says something about this whole notion of literacy and what it is and what it offers, who it's for, who it's not for, why we want it. That's a social justice issue right there to me. And it's not new, this whole notion of literacy as a social justice issue. It's not new. It's very much an old thing. We're doing great work right now, but as a result of all that work and that perseverance, a very rich legacy of literacy learning and using literacy as an education and social justice tool, that was set. My third thought is that we must draw strength from that. I say we call it, drawing strength from our literacy roots and our literacy legacies. And we use that strength, we must use that strength to do some very specific things. So in my mind, first, we must design and implement strategic plans for engaging children in work that is meaningful as it relates to literacy learning. It's meaningful, it's lasting, it's joyful. So there are some things that need to happen, though, in order for that to be true. We need to situate this literacy learning within the community and draw from the community. We must ground it in family partnerships, family literacy partnerships, school-family partnerships. And we must ensure that it's well-resourced. And I'm talking about resources in many different ways. Human resource, right? The people doing the work. Financial resources, time as a resource, and social capital as a resource. The second thing in my mind that needs to happen as a part of drawing strength is to monitor the effectiveness of the programs that we put in place. That's a critical piece. I'm an assessment person, not assessment in terms of how we think of it like the standardized tests. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about reflecting, revising, refining, thinking about what we're doing, being honest about what we're doing. Are we really putting in the work like the mayor said? Are we lifting 225? Or are we faking in front and lifting, lifting 100, right? And saying, oh, I'm just working so hard, right? I kind of like to think of it, a good analogy is the Olympics. All those Olympians who made it to the games this summer, and they worked really hard to get there, and they did that. They achieved that under the guidance of mentors, whole teams surrounding them, honest conversations about what they were doing, what they weren't doing, setting goals, monitoring the progress. It was a collective effort. And the same is true of the work that we are doing, but will continue to do in this city. And then the third thing, and this is really one I think, this is probably my favorite one. It is critical that we construct human networks human networks that advance the most effective practices that we've established. And that we think about doing that with sustainability and legacy in mind. So I'm thinking something like, making literacy a part of Newark's brand in education. So, right, when people Google Newark, what pops up? This whole idea of literacy and the city's commitment to literacy, and I mean strong and bold, everywhere, that should be coming up. Okay, some of it's there, but this is an opportunity to make that a really strong part of the city's brand, because it is, again, it's a social justice issue. So my fourth and final thought is that, and I don't want to add gloom and doom, but a couple of other people have touched on this, and I think it's appropriate to touch on it as well. We must work with a sense of urgency and focus, because many U.S. states have already criminalized the types of work and foci required to build strong literacy learning ecosystems for the children of Newark and across the nation, right? Many states are saying, no, on the DEI stuff. Enough with the DEI stuff. As of this past summer, efforts to dismantle DEI work have succeeded in 10 states. And at that time, approximately 15 more states had put anti-DEI legislation, had put it in the pipeline, right, so they could get that passed through. And these bans, it's important because these bans, they impact our work as educators because they're aimed at organizations, they're aimed at P-12 institutions, at the school systems, and what they do is they prevent teacher educators like me and school principals like you and your teachers from addressing topics that are important parts of a person's identity from which they draw strength. Things like race, ethnicity, diversity, equity, inclusion, gender identity, sexuality. And unfortunately, this is the part, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but unfortunately, there is a strong probability, that the same will be done nationally. So in closing, I'm going to leave you with these words. Contemporary scholars and practitioners like Doctors Ladson Billings, Paris, Aleem, Muhammad, Givens, Flores, Baker Bell, and so many others, I can't even list them all here, they have paved the way for us. Let us not forget, though, that Newark educators, and I'm talking about the scholars, like the school leaders, the supervisors, instructional coaches, teachers, and other stakeholders, you're already doing impactful work. We have the talent, we have the drive, and we have the vision to plot a steep literacy learning trajectory for the students of Newark. The blueprint for this work, it's within us. It's not a matter of education alone. As has been said over and over so far this morning, it is a matter of social justice. The children of Newark, they have a right to learn to read. So let's channel the strength of our ancestors, look to the research and the success stories, including our own, to get this work done. We are in a great time of need and opportunity. And there's one thing I know for sure, and it's that together, we can do this. I look forward to discussing this with you further later this morning and in future conversations, and I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here. Please contact me Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Makia, for just reminding us that as we are supporting young people, that it's an equity issue, it's the issue of access. And we have two more speakers that's going to really lay this out. Dr. Jacobson is going, hold on, I'm going in the wrong direction. All right, Dr. Jacobson is from Montclair, and he's going to be providing strategies. And right after Dr. Jacobson is going to be Paula White, the Executive Director of Jersey Can, and she's going to be talking about the legislation. And the reason why I'm doing both of them at the same time is right after Dr. Jacobson, I'm going to ask Paula White to come up here, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Makia to come sit here and really dig into the questions that you're really asking. And trust me, the fact that you're here, you're giving your young people an advantage, because you can create better systems and structures to support your children better. And when children are supported by adults better, they actually achieve better. So I just think it's important that we get our questions ready. But let's start with Dr. Jacobson giving us strategies on reading comprehension. So let's give it up for Dr. Jacobson from Montclair University.
Hi, everybody. How are you? So my name is indeed Eric Jacobson. I am the son of Joyce and Robert, brother of Jennifer, husband of Shirley, father of Aki and Teo, friend to many, vexation to some, probably. But and I'm very happy to be in Newark. I'm always happy to be in Newark. Just this past year, at Montclair State University, we were one of the state partners for the Rapid Plus initiative, and we worked with some colleagues in Newark on that. And then also I'm very happy to say that in August, we graduated a cohort of reading specialists from the Newark Public School System. So I want to thank my colleagues in Newark for making that possible, and we're always happy to work with Newark on projects like that. It was very nice to be able to work with teachers who could immediately implement the things that we were talking about in the classroom, and then also bring their questions to the classroom in very concrete ways, right? It wasn't abstract. It was like, I'm in this school, and this is what I'm going to do. So I know it's tough to be the person between you and lunch, but I'm raising my hand, and I'm going to do that. Does it go forward? Okay. Okay, so I'm old. This is where I grew up. I grew up in Quincy, Massachusetts, and this was my local library. Quincy's a granite mining town, so it was made out of all granite. This was a photo from the 20s. It looked pretty much like that when I was going there when I was a kid. So two things here that happened that were very, very important, that are consistent with some of the things that you've heard already. When I went there as a young kid, I got my library card. I was able to check out as many books as I wanted. I was like, this is awesome. This is the best thing ever. When my younger sister went and she applied for her library card, she did not get it. Because the system that they had was you had to write your name in between these two lines. And if your name went outside the lines, you wouldn't get your library card. Tell me, does that have anything to do with your capability of either taking care of a book, engaging with a book? No, it was simply grown-ups being mean, right? So it taught me a very valuable lesson as a young kid, right? That sometimes grown-ups and adults are going to support us as readers, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're going to set up the barriers that people have been talking about, right? From a very young age, I also understood that literacy was an equity issue, right? Why am I getting this support, and why is my sister not getting this support? Right? Why does it keep doing this? Oh, it goes this way. Okay, so one of the things that we try to do at our programs at Montclair State is help our students navigate the reading wars, right? And if you've been in the field for a while, you know what the reading wars are, right? Every 5 to 6 years, 10 years, things go back and forth in terms of policy and procedures and things like that. It's very messy, as most wars are, right? And so what we want to do is help our students understand the language, understand the research, so when they hear something like science of reading, they understand that this is not new, right? That there's lots of science of reading, that there's been science about reading for a really long time, and you need to work through these buzzwords and these phrases and things like that. So what I'm hoping to do this morning, fairly quickly, is to walk you through some of this language and to navigate some of these aspects of the reading war so you can understand what's going on out there and then in your classrooms. So I'll go back to this. So for many of you, how many of you have seen Scarborough's Rope, work with Scarborough's Rope in your school? I see smattering of hands. This is what the state is recommending that people use to conceptualize what's happening with literacy development. Right? So this is what we did in the Rapid Plus grants, and this is what we do in a lot of professional development opportunities to talk about Scarborough's Rope. So the basic idea here, right, is that you have this word recognition and at a foundational level, which includes phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, syllables, that kind of stuff, decoding, so you're understanding the alphabetic principle, phonics, what have you, and then sight recognition. The idea is over time, of course, word recognition becomes more automatic, right? We don't have to spend as much time thinking about it. But the other part of Scarborough's Rope is thinking about language comprehension, right? So what's your background knowledge? What is it that you know, right? What vocabulary do you have? What command of language structures do you have, like syntax and semantics and things like that? What's your verbal reasoning? What kind of inferences and metaphors can you deal with? And then literacy knowledge. The idea is over time, that becomes more strategic, right? So this becomes more automatic, this becomes more strategic, and when these ropes are woven together, then we have, you know, reading that we can really use to dig into topics in a deeper way. So what does this look like? For the word recognition level, phonological awareness, decoding, sight recognition, all clearly important, right? Super, super important, foundational. However, what I would suggest, and what the research suggests, is if we're thinking about reading comprehension, and if we're thinking about getting to the aspects of literacy or social justice or deeper understandings of the world, this isn't where we stop, right? And far too many literacy interventions stop here, right? They're like, our kids are struggling, our kids are behind, right? We need to do lots and lots of this. Yeah, of course, some kids need a lot of this, right? But one of the things that we know from research is that, let's say, phonics instruction, like phonics interventions, give me a guess, how many minutes would be productive in one day for a child to be involved in phonics instruction? Any numbers? It's a small room, so I can hear everybody. 50 minutes, you're very close, about 20, right? So it tops out at about 20 minutes, right? But you know there's phonics interventions and literacy interventions out there that go way more than 20 minutes, right? And what ends up happening in those interventions is kids don't have time for science, history, social studies, arts, music, which is where they develop their world knowledge and their word knowledge, right? So clearly these are important, right? But that's not where they stop. You know, for about a decade ago, we did all this work on fluency. Kids' fluency increased, reading comprehension, flatline, right? We did all this work on decoding. Decoding increases, comprehension, flatline, right? So important, this is not where we stop. What also gets pushed out of the way sometimes is these aspects of language comprehension, right? So what do kids know about the world, their vocabulary, the language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you a sentence that I've drafted, which is going to demonstrate many of these aspects of language, all right? So here's a sentence. So because of the unfortunate incident at the diner in our hometown, my sister, a woman with a refined palate, would always ask the waitress for information about the age of the Taylor ham before deciding to order it. Okay, so if you're a student, or if you're working with your student, which one of these words, in terms of their vocabulary, might need some pre-teaching or might need some extra support? palette, right? So this is something that your students might not know. Refined, they might not know. Incident, perhaps. Unfortunate, perhaps, right? So when we're thinking about supporting our students beyond the decoding level, right, one of the things that we're doing is thinking about how we're going to support them with vocabulary. And certainly I think most people would agree with this. Unfortunate, refined palette, things like that. I would also suggest when we're thinking about vocabulary, we're thinking about inferences and connotations and things like that. How do you know that this sentence that I crafted is not actually about me, who grew up in Quincy, Massachusetts, but is about a narrator giving this voice? How do you know this is not me? From Quincy, Massachusetts. Taylor Ham, right? Exactly right. So Taylor Ham, Northern New Jersey, right? So if you're the reader of the sentence, you have to make these inferences that helps you set up what the context is of the sentence, of the story, right? And in fact, if you're from Southern New Jersey, you're like, you know, it's what? It's pork roll. You'd be like, I don't know what's going on here. So sometimes when I talk to my students or other teachers, I'm like, where did this take place? And they're like, at the diner. I'm like, I know, where's the diner? They're like, in the hometown. I'm like, yeah, I know that, but where's the hometown? And they're like, we don't know. They didn't tell us. It's like, yeah, they did. I did tell you because of the Taylor Ham, right? Let's also think about here, this part of the sentence, a woman with a refined palate. What is that in terms of syntax? Do people know what that part of speech is? Okay, it's called an appositive, right? And what an appositive does is it modifies or describes a noun to come before it or after it, okay? So here, my sister, I'm adding the additional information, a woman with a refined palate. Does this ever give your students, sentences like this give your students trouble? Right, this added information, clause upon clause upon clause, right? So one of the things that we have to do to help students understand this is point out that this isn't a positive and this is how it works, right? So one strategy we can use is simply called blocking it out, right? So if here's the sentence, Mr. Rosen, the principal of the school, congratulated Shannon, his secretary. I block out the appositive describing Mr. Rosen, I block out the appositive describing Shannon, and now I've got Mr. Rosen congratulated Shannon. Then I can backtrack, right? Once they understand the basics of what's happening, then I can reintroduce these appositives, right? So this is making the syntax of sentences explicit and clear to students, right? Not necessarily done all the time. All right, another way to work with appositives is just called the different names for me. So I might say, Eric Jacobson, a professor from Montclair State University, or a collector of music from around the world, or a good rebounder despite his limited height. All three of these things are true, and I will stand by all three of these. So what's an appositive for you? Maybe turn to the person next to you. Like, what would you give as an appositive for you? And you don't have to go to like TMI territory or anything, but like, what's an appositive for you that you might share? Anybody want to share theirs with the group? So what appositive would you come up for yourself, right? So here's my name, my noun, and then a phrase that describes me, right? That's called an appositive. Anybody want to share their different name for you, for yourself?
A woman with a refined palate.
All right, there you go. She's a woman with a refined palate. So now you know who to get restaurant recommendations from. Anybody else want to share your appositive? A different name for you? There you go, Alex, a father of two, perfectly, right? So once we make these explicit, students can start to understand them, and we can help them with the syntax of complex and longer sentences. All right, there's another relationship, a syntactic relationship in here. You see I've highlighted Taylor Ham and it. What's the relationship here between Taylor Ham and it? So it is an anaphoric, what we call anaphoric relationship with Taylor Ham, right? It refers back to a previous noun. I know you've seen students struggle with sentences that have it that all these other pronouns in it, and they're like, what connects to what, right? So especially it, right? Like it is so generally vague. You're like, what? I don't know which one this is referring to, right? So how do we help students with these anaphoric relationships? There's a couple ways we can do that. So one is a strategy just called thread, right? Where we literally mark up the text, right? So if we've got Damien and Maria, what are all the other pronouns and references to them in the rest of that text, right? So they, them. So when I see those pronouns, I know that this is related to Damien and Maria, right? And then here down at the bottom, process and it. Now I've shaded it in so we know that this is a different anaphoric relationship, okay? Most of the time, it goes sort of the noun and then, and the pronoun, but sometimes think about sentences, it's introduced with the pronoun and then the noun comes afterwards, right? So something like thread literally helps them make the connections between these, right? The coherence in a paragraph is a result of consistent language use and also these anaphoric relationships. Another way to think about anaphoric relationships is a strategy just called replace, right? So here's a sentence. Heidi Ann drove down the highway. She smiled at the beautiful weather. It lifted her spirits. So we've got the she and the it, and then the students themselves came up with references in both cases, right? So that they built those sentences, and then they could see how these types of sentences are constructed, and so that they can do it themselves, right? So again, hands-on work with the syntax, because syntax matters, right? Syntax is a key part of reading comprehension. All right, one quick other thing. The way that the sentence begins, because of the unfortunate incident at the diner in our hometown. Anybody know what that is linguistically? Is that sentence easy to read, parse, understand the way that it's constructed? It's a little complicated, right? Where would this sentence normally start? With my sister, right? But there's all this added information before we get to my sister. So linguistically, this is called a left branching sentence. And the reason that we call it a left branching sentence is where you think you would start, go to the left and there's a whole bunch of other information, right? So this is actually on us in part, right, to make sure that our texts aren't necessarily complex, but also to help students understand, where the sentence may begin in a way where the subject is. Okay, so you all have heard this, right, probably since time immemorial, right? What do we want our students to do with the text? Text to self, text to text, text to world. Why? So what? Right? So I often ask teachers, like, what's your plan for this lesson plan? Oh, I want the student to make a text to self connection. So why do you want them to make a text to self connection? Oh, well, because they're expected to. I'm like, yeah, but why are they expected to? Oh, because it's in the state standards. Why is it in the state standards? Right? So after like 10 minutes of discussion, sometimes the teachers I work with get to, when you make a text to self connection, you can actually maybe think about a problem that you're dealing with in your real life, and then that might help you think it through, right? Or to get to issues of identity, it may help me think about my identity. But there's got to be a reason for it, and not just like, here, I showed you how I could do it, right? Another thing I will say in passing is that students do not owe us their text-to-self connections. We are neither their parents, their friends, or their therapists, right? And there's going to be some things that kids connect to in a text that are going to be heavy, right? And they don't owe us that sharing, right? So we have to respect the fact that there's going to be some things that they don't want to share, right? So why text to self? Why text to text? Why text to world? We have to have a reason for it, right? And if it just feels like a skill or a hoop that teachers are asking us to jump through, why would they want to do it? To go back to the point about why would a kid want to put down a phone? I'm not going to put down a phone if you're asking me to just jump through these hoops for no reason whatsoever, right? What's in it for me to make a text to text, a text to self, or a text to world connection? Okay. One reason that we might want to read, right? And this goes back to issues of the election and things like that. This is probably something that you've seen also since time immemorial, KWL. Raise your hand if you've seen KWL, right? Everybody, right? I don't like KWL. Reason I don't like KWL is I much prefer this other structure called reading and analyzing nonfiction, right? What I think I know, confirmed, misconceptions, new information, and wondering. Right? Give a kid KWL and you're talking about Rosa Parks. Say, what do I know? Oh, she was a Martian. She was an actress. She was a famous chef. Okay, no, that's not true, right? So you need to be able to confirm what you think you know, right? That's one of the reasons that we read, is to confirm what we think we know and to learn things about the world, right? We also read to understand misconceptions that we have. Often when I do a lesson on Rosa Parks, I ask people, how old was Rosa Parks? And what do you think people say? Old, right? They're like, oh, she was somebody's granny. And I'm not throwing grannies under the bus because grannies are awesome, right? But she was 40. She was 40. I'm way on the other side of that, right? But so she was 40. And the idea that she was just like little old lady Rosa Parks, right? Reason I think that's the case is that it sends a model of social change is it's kind of accidental, right? Like one day her dogs were killing her. She's on the bus. She didn't want to move because her dogs were killing her. And then what happened? Oh, the civil rights movement, right? As opposed to 40-year-old kick-ass Rosa Parks, part of the planning, organizing the civil rights movement, right? So why do we get this image of somebody like Rosa Parks like that? Also, the other thing I don't like about KWL is what I want to know comes so early, right? I'm going to ask you, all right, so do a quick KWL for outant. All right, what do you want to know about outant? What is it? Right? Who is it, right? Outant was one of the first Secretary Generals of the United Nations, first one to not come from Europe, right? What is it or who was it? Those aren't really particularly interesting questions, right? You're going to answer them pretty quickly, right? If you do some reading about outant, then you might have some more interesting questions about it, right? So we're asking students to identify questions about stuff that they just don't know that much about. So how rich are those questions going to be? Not particularly rich questions, right? So in addition to doing all this decoding, right, the state of New Jersey also supports something called literary knowledge, which I think is a really good thing that they do, right? So the idea is that with literary knowledge, students understand why people care about reading, why people care about certain stories, how stories are told in different communities and different cultures, right? They understand the world of reading and the world of text, right? This includes how different types of texts are constructed. That means the difference between a science report, a poem, review of a movie, right? That there's different genres of reading, there's different genres of writing. And then what role these texts play in society, to go back to the standardized test. Why do we have standardized tests as opposed to portfolios and things like that? So thinking more broadly, inviting students in is inviting them to think about how we talk about reading. I think the so what is inviting students into this grand conversation. Why do any of us read outside of our job, right? To learn things, to have fun, to connect, to establish our identity, right? So we want students to be able to ask these questions, right? So why do other people care about this text? Why might I care about it, right? And what can I do with it, and what should I do with it, right? That's way different than just, all right, make a text-to-self connection, right? This is why we read in the first place. So, for example, we have to think about what the text is about. And it's not the plot. I know what the plot is, but it's what it's about, right? So here's Little Red Riding Hood. What's Little Red Riding Hood about? Not the plot, but what's Little Red Riding Hood about? Okay, keep going with that. That's the moral, but what's it about? All right, what kind of dangers?
A hungry wolf.
That's the plot device, but that's not what it's about. Does she overcome her fears? Yeah, why? That's the lesson, right? Don't give personal information. I would suggest to you, and I'm not alone in this reading, right? What's the basic story in Little Red Riding Hood, right? So mother says, all right, here's your basket of goodies. I want you to go to your grandmother's house and to go through the wood. Don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to strangers. Do not give up your basket of goodies. Whatever you do, do not give up your basket of goodies. You're a 13-year-old girl. You're a 14-year-old girl. People going to be talking to you are out there in the forest. Do not give up your goodies. However, you're a 13 or 14-year-old girl. That wolf's kind of cute. Maybe I'll talk to that wolf, right? I would suggest that Little Red Riding Hood is about, a young woman's sexual maturation and the dangers in the world that are presented to her with that, right? She's Red Riding Hood. She's not Green Riding Hood. She's not Blue Riding Hood, right? Why is she Red Riding Hood? She's becoming a young woman, right? Red's an important color when you're becoming a young woman, right? If that story didn't have that deeper resonance, we wouldn't have been talking about it for 400 years, right? That's why people have been talking about this story, right? Because what happens in the end? She gets into bed with the wolf and she's like, oh, what big ears you have, like what big eyes you have, what big teeth. Unless she's blind, she knows that's the wolf. There's no way she doesn't know that's the wolf, unless she's blind, right? She gets in bed with the wolf, and what happens? She gets eaten, right? It's her pushing her boundaries, which is what adolescents do, right? They push their boundaries. All right, Batman. What's Batman about? Anybody? What's Batman about, you think? What does he do? He roams the city in his pajamas, like beating up people, right? And why does he do that? Because his parents were killed in front of him when he was a kid, right? And he's doing this as a grown-up. Suggests to me that there are some traumas maybe we don't get over, right? And we carry these traumas our whole lives, and these traumas influence our behavior, right? The trauma may be who we are, right? Right? So this is why Batman is important, I think, all right? All right, and this is an open question. I don't really have an answer for this one. Goldilocks, I literally have no idea what the story's about. Yeah, but she gets away with it, right? So to me, it's like this perfect model of white privilege. She breaks into somebody's house, she breaks their bed, eats their food, takes their clothes, and gets away scot-free. She faces no consequences in this story. I have no idea what the story is supposed to be telling us, right? I just don't get it. I just don't get that story. Okay. So then part of this grand conversation is inviting students in, like, what do other people think of this text and what do I think of this text? Why do other people care about it? So for example, To Kill a Mockingbird, still on many school things, still on many school syllabi. Perfectly fine book, right? But why? Why is it on the syllabus and why should we talk about it? We should be talking to kids about that, right? Monster. Any of you read Monster? You know Monster, right? So Monster's some places, not other places, right? I think Monster's a really terrific book, right? And we can have a conversation about what we should be reading. For example, with Monster, what I do when I'm working with Monster, these may be too small, right? But in part, I think what Monster's about is guilt, right? The concept of guilt. And like any rich word, I don't know how many in the room, there's 20 of us in the room, maybe 25 of us in the room, right? If you asked us how to define guilt, we would probably have 25 different definitions of what we mean by guilt, right? So in reading a book like Monster, not only are you talking about the plot or social justice stuff, but you're talking about the concept of guilt and how we have different perspectives on what guilt is, right? That's why it's a good book. So here's a theme spotlight strategy, right, where you list a bunch of actions and then you're like, all right, so rank these on a scale of most guilty to least guilty. That would make you feel the most guilty, that would make you feel the least guilty. I don't know if is it big enough to read? All right, so, and anybody quickly, something that you might put at the number 1, it would make you feel the most guilty, or 8, the one that would make you feel the least guilty? You want me to read them? Can you see it? Okay.
So, number 1 for me would be Waffle and Bakery, who share a friend's secret with another friend.
Okay, and why?
Because I have a great value around loyalty. So to me, that is a huge issue or
Okay. And what would be your 8?
Number 8 would probably be while sleepwalking, see your mom's favorite babysitter.
Okay, why is that?
Because my mom was very
Okay, all right. Other folks, what's your 1 and 8?
I'm the most guilty of friend who knows the pedophile about
Okay, so why is that number 1 for you? Okay, so one of the things that you're considering is the results, and personal injury, bodily injury is one of the things that there. Okay, and number 8 for you? Okay, all right. So already we can see, right, one logic is around loyalty, right? One logic is around the personal harm that might result in somebody. So then we can start to have a conversation about this among the students when we're thinking about guilt. How are you determining how you feel about it? For me, the number 1 is somebody else is blamed for your mistake and you do not step forward to take the blame, because that's literally somebody, like, I'm responsible for this. And then my last one is during a test, use an answer that the teacher accidentally left on the board. Because if I'm a student, I'm actually like bound by the rules of studenthood that I have to use that information. I would be violating generations of student behavior if I didn't. That's on the teacher, that's not on me. The second to last one for me would be the vase. Because if my mother knows I'm sleepwalking, she shouldn't have put a vase out there for me to knock over, right? So that's really not my fault, right? But here, this is the conversation about guilt, right? And what do we mean by guilt? And this is much, much deeper and much richer, right, than just some worksheet that students are working through. So, yes, Scarborough's wrote, right? We need to think about decoding. We need to think about language comprehension, but we need to think about all these other things too if we're gonna support our students, right? What's their motivation? What level of engagement do they have? How do we increase that? How do they set their own goals for reading, right? And not just have grown-ups tell them what their goals are for reading. What's their levels of self-efficacy? Can they feel like they can accomplish those goals that they set out for themselves, right? Understanding what the task demands are that are being put on them. What are the grown-ups asking them to do with this text? And then some agency regarding those tasks. Like, no, actually, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. I want to do something different with it, right? Text selection, clearly an issue. Understanding the context of the reading, of the writing, but then also resetting that context so they're not just like passively consuming this stuff, right? That they're involved in creating the context, right? And etc. So reading comprehension, incredibly complex, right? But there's stuff that we can do, right? At the decoding level, at the syntax level, and also inviting students into these deeper conversations that lead to true comprehension. Happy to talk to people about this at any time. Love talking about reading comprehension, love being in Newark, and I don't want to delay us too much more before food. So thank you for having me here this morning.
You see I walked up here fast, right? I know I'm standing in between y'all and lunch. Please accept my apology. I'm so glad to be here. But the first thing I'll say is a shout out to educators who are in the building on a Saturday. So shout out to yourselves, okay? For any reason at all, whether it is obligatory, whether you could come here on your own, whatever it is, shout out to you. So I am Paula White, and I'm the executive director of Jersey Can. And Jersey Can is an organization that has a singular mission, and that is to get every child in the state of New Jersey access to a high-quality education, regardless of any of their markers of demography, where they live, who their parents are, how they learn, anything else at all. We think that every child has a right to have a high-quality education, and that is the goal, and that's what we work for each and every day. And I just realized I was coming from an event that we have a teacher fellowship and a parent fellowship, and where we support educators as well as parents around advocacy. And so that's why I had this tag on, and I just realized I had it on. So I'm gonna spend just a few minutes to sort of ground you in sort of who I am and why, I find this work to be important. I'll do that very quickly. And then I will talk about exactly what it says that I'm supposed to be talking about, which is to think about the bridge from policy to classroom reality. So what does it mean to do the work that I do, where I'm talking to legislators, where I'm working on getting bills passed, and then the bill gets passed, and what does that look like in the classroom? And doesn't even make it to the classroom, right? So that's the million-dollar question. So I'm a traditionally trained teacher. I went to Spelman College. Shout out to HBCUs and Spelman, I love it. I've done a lot of different things in education. I founded a public charter school in the city of Newark, and I led school improvement for traditional public schools in the state of New Jersey. So I was the chief school improvement officer, where I was responsible for getting schools improved for about 200 plus schools statewide. And I also led a couple of advocacy organizations, other education advocacy organizations, other than the one that I work for now. One was in New York City, another one was here in New Jersey. And so that just kind of gives you sort of a quick and dirty of what I've done. So I've been in and around education for a very long time. And I'll just say, I have a lot of years in this work. And I will share two fun facts about me. So one fun fact, and it's not really about me, but it's about her, is that when I was at Spelman College, my professor who taught me foundations of teaching reading was Christine King Farris. And if that name doesn't ring a bell to you, she is the sister of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so she really taught me how to teach reading the way that, like, oh, guess what? Y'all acting brand new. Now we're teaching reading in this way. Well, she taught us that years ago because she understood and knew what it took for children to learn how to read, and she understood the importance of that. So I always say that she is the unsung civil rights hero in that family, because she taught, hundreds, really thousands of pre-service educators how to teach reading. And another fun fact about me is that I ran a half marathon with a broken foot. So I'm telling you that so that you know that I'm crazy and I'm relentless, and I know that you are too. And that's why I share that fact about myself, because you all don't show up here, you don't do this work unless you're crazy and relentless. So just want to say that. And so what I want to segue into now is just to talk about, I'm very grateful for Dr. Brown and this forum, more, just as grateful, if not more, for for Mayor Baraka and what he is doing in this city, as well as the folks who went before me, Dr. McKeon, Dr. Jacobson. So thank you so much for what you bring. And we work to pass legislation because it impacts flesh and blood kids. Okay, I have a student, John Quavius Reed, who's doing 71 years in prison in Atlanta. And one of the big reasons is that he was not connected to his education and didn't know how to read well. And I'm just gonna tell you about what it looks like to be really connected to your education. I'm gonna read you a quote that someone said in America many years ago, and if you know who it is, let me know. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. I'm sorry? Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. That's who said that. I read that in a read aloud in my class when I taught 5th grade in the city of Atlanta. And because I decided about my 4th year in teaching that I was going to teach my social studies class using historical fiction novels and primary source documents. So I would read speeches, the students would read them, and so on. And so I read that, and the reaction from one of my students was, he was a motherfucker. And so everybody's like, ooh, ooh, and everybody got very upset in my class, and they were like, Miss White Bradley, he gonna be in trouble, what's going on, da 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 da. Well, he made a text connection. Didn't he make a text connection? Because what he understood was that Abraham Lincoln, of course, was saying, my priority is to save the Union. However that happens, whatever we've got to do, let's do it. And so that is the reason that we want to make sure that students learn how to read, is not just so that they can fill out applications, because that's important, not just so that they can have access to society, but so that they can internalize what it means to be a citizen of this country. And I say that having just become a citizen of this country 52 days ago. And I can tell you more about that if you're ever interested. But I want to move very quickly now to the legislation that was passed on August 13th in the state of New Jersey as it relates to reading. And how many people know that we have new standards in place in the state of New Jersey around literacy? That's fantastic. So what that says is that, the ecosystem is doing what it's supposed to do. Answer me this. Spell VC words and CVC words. What grade do you think you're supposed to be doing that now in the state of New Jersey? Teaching a child to spell VC words and CVC words. V meaning vowel, C meaning consonant. So a VC word would be at, vowel, consonant. A CVC word would be rat, right? Consonant, vowel, consonant. What grade level do you think a student needs to know how to do that in the state of New Jersey as of the 2024-25 school year? Any thoughts? Just shout out a grade level. Kindergarten, y'all on point, love it, okay. And spell single syllable words with less common and complex graphemes, like O-U-G-H, for like cough or bow or tough. That they should know how to spell those words. What grade do you think that is? Second grade? Okay, it's actually third grade, interestingly. And last one, write sentences with increasing complexity. First grade, y'all. So the standards are changing, which means that the expectations are changing, which means that our children need to know new things, and our parents need to know that, and our teachers need to know that as well. And so the purpose of this legislation in reading was not just it was to draw a line in the sand and say that we know the way that the largest swath of children learn how to read, and so we should be aligning our instruction in the classroom to that way. And to be clear, and I hope it's clear from the example that I gave you when I started, the purpose of reading is not to call out words. The purpose of reading is not to get a 100 on a phonics test. However, that's a gatekeeper, right? That's the bouncer in the club, okay? If you can't get in, nothing else happens. And so we need our students to be able to read fluently in order for them to access information. And so that was the purpose of this legislation. And so Jersey Can, my organization, we coalesced about 20 organizations around the umbrella of saying, let us focus all of our energies. Let's let's talk to the governor directly. Let's talk to legislators directly. Let's, when legislators put out legislation, let's give them feedback on that legislation. And let's work as hard as we can to get the legislation passed. I am going to make sure that Dr. Brown has it's a 2-pager, which is a synopsis of the legislation, so that where you are aware of what it says and what it does. And so the first thing I want you to know is that it established a mandated student literacy working group in the state of New Jersey. That working group is meeting right now on a regular basis at the Department of Education. And that working group has a charge. What that working group is supposed to be doing is to produce a report of best literacy practices in the state and country, and they're supposed to be recommending regulations for the field meaning that goes out to every single district. So this group is going to be providing guidance, it will be vetted through the Department of Ed, and then that is going to inform how you are mandated, quite frankly, to teach literacy, okay? And so that is the purpose of this group. It's a very important group, you know, our organization, as well as others across the state, worked to make sure that there was good representation of folks on that group. By law, they had to have regional representation, charter representation, and I will tell you, they didn't have to have parent representation, but then I saw the document, I was like, come on, y'all, are y'all for real, 2024? Is that what we're doing? We're not including parents? So it has to have parent representation as well. And so that also educator expertise, media specialists, as well as teachers of multilingual learners, teachers of students with reading disabilities. So really a cross-section of representation in that working group to make sure that students have what they need. And they have to provide guidance on high-quality literacy screeners, high-quality instructional materials. How frequently should students be screened at every grade level? As well as how do we do data analysis and reading to really get the best outcomes for our students? And so one of the things that this legislation says is that starting in the 2025-2026 school year, all students kindergarten through third grade will have to be screened twice a year. So that means that for about 15 or 20 minutes, a person is going to sit with them one-on-one and assess what they know along the continuum of literacy. So they may say, point to, you know, the pictures that show words that rhyme. And so if a student shows bat and boy, then obviously now you know, okay, they think the beginning sounds or what determine a rhyming word. And so now you know you have to, you know, teach them that's really boy and toy. That's important, right? Because it's going to set them up for being able to understand the construct of the language and what these words are meaning when we talk about that. Not only will the screener have to happen twice a year, it will have to be aligned with the New Jersey Department of Education recommendations, okay? So, you know, there are a lot of good screeners. Some of them are not so good, and they're not getting the kind of information that's important to understand how you learn to read. And then you also have to provide supports to that student so that they can read well, depending on where they fall on that continuum. The results will have to be shared with parents 30 days within the window, within the screening window. It has to be benchmarked against grade level expectations. So a lot of times, students will think that their parents will think their children are doing well, but they have to understand how that lines up with grade level expectations. I went to high school in Canada. When I was in middle school, I told my father that I was so good in French. I was the best student in French in my class. I was like, Dad, I'm so good in French, I have my own orange workbook. I'm the only person in the class, I got an orange workbook. When I'm finished, because I finished everything early, I get to work in my orange workbook. That's how smart I am. And my father's like this, you know, old Jamaican dad. He's like, okay, well, I'm gonna come up to the school. I'm like, please do not come up to the school. So he came up to the school. We found out, which I did not know, that I was in the lowest French. So yeah, I had an orange workbook, but I was in the low. There was like a low, there was a medium, there was a high. I was in the lowest French. As a result of my dad coming up, he said, well, we need to have her in a more rigorous course. I was in the highest French. I went into French immersion. I hated it because I had to ask to use the bathroom in French. I had to watch Star Wars in French. It was hell. But now I speak French fluently. And so that is, you know, the power of understanding where a student is and supporting them to get them where they need to be. And that is what the legislation will require. And not only will parents have to be informed, but the Department of Education will have to receive those screening results. Okay, so you have, you know, Elenia Matos in your class. The Department of Education is going to get the results to understand where those students are, as well as where do they grow to be. So that is something that is happening, that's coming down sort of, you know, the pike. And some people, you know, it feels like, okay, that's a little oppressive. Now we're going to have to send all those things into the department. What are they going to do with it? But I think the idea is to really say, let's make sure that we have our eyes on our kids because it's super important. The Department of Education we'll create an online resource center, which I think is really great, which will help teachers to understand, you know, and folks to be able to refer to stuff, to understand about literacy. And speaking about Dr. Jacobson and the rapid training that's given to teachers, a lot of those resources, I suspect, will end up in that online resource center, which I think will be fantastic. Very relevant to you as I draw to a close is that there will be free professional development provided from the Department of Education, and it will be obligatory to be delivered once a year. Who will it be delivered to? All pre-K through 6th grade teachers, all media specialists, all reading specialists, all speech language specialists, okay, teachers of students with disabilities, teachers of multilingual learners, school administrators. So you will be counted among the folks that will have to receive professional development. And in kindergarten through 3rd grade, that professional development is going to look like learning about orthography, aka spelling, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and comprehension. 4th through 6th grade, teachers will have to learn about the neurobiology of reading, advanced study, word study, fluency, and reading comprehension. And then for school administrators, you all will be learning about high quality instructional design and high quality literacy instruction, how to deliver high quality literacy instruction for kindergarten through grade 6. So those are, you know, that's what's going to be happening in the state of New Jersey to support our students around reading. The 4 requirements that I just pointed out, you know, literacy screeners, parent notification, and professional development. And the last thing is high quality instructional materials, which means that the Department of Education will give guidance around the kinds of instructional materials that should be used to teach reading. All of that was a part of a report that our organization published. So we had 5 recommendations, and 4 of those found its way into the report. The 5th recommendation was around pre-service teachers and their preparation and and making sure that those preparation programs were aligned to what is known as foundational reading instruction. Some people call it the science of reading. New Jersey uses the term foundational reading instruction. Potato, potato, as long as we, you know, have that in there. And in my report, I mentioned that Newark hires the highest number of teachers each year in the state of New Jersey. And so, you know, it's the old example about if you have a problem and you have to keep going upstream, then finally you should be finding out like what is upstream. And so we don't want principals like yourselves with everything that you have to do to have to get teachers who may not be properly trained in teaching reading, and then now you have to train them to teach reading, and then they're gonna have a learning curve. So that actually is taken care of in something called Chapter 9, which is not a law that gets passed, but that's regs, that's regulatory changes, and that happens at the State Board of Education. And so between the State Board of Education, the legislature, we are really trying to create an educational ecosystem that allows students to learn to read well and allows educators to have what they need in order to make that happen. And so that is just a sampling of all that is happening with regard to literacy instruction in the state of New Jersey. And one thing to know is that the working group I mentioned, that's effective immediately. The literacy screeners, that takes effect in the 2025-2026 school year, and the PD starts as of July 1st, 2025. So I would imagine maybe your school district will have, perhaps principals will probably get their PD first, and then the teachers will get it after that, I'm not sure. And so I will close by saying that, you know, I think that in order to really be the best educators that we can be, that we need to be authentic. We need to bring ourselves and who we are to the work, because that's what children connect with. If there's one thing a kid knows, it's whether or not you're being real. But the only thing better than an authentic educator is a knowledgeable educator. Because your personality is nice, so is mine, but if I don't have the knowledge of my craft to bring to my students, then I'm doing them a disservice. So we want an authentic educator, we want a knowledgeable educator. The only thing that's better than an authentic, knowledgeable educator is an authentic, knowledgeable educator who also is passionate. Because if you don't have that passion, it's going to be very, very difficult to stay the course over the, through all that you go through. And I know that you can tell me stories because you go through a lot, and we all have as educators. And so I'll just leave you with that, and the idea that strategy is also important. Knowing to be strategic. How do you spend your time? That was one of the biggest things that was a challenge when we led the work in the state of New Jersey around school improvement. It's just understanding how to spend time, because you have so little of it as educators. So I want to thank you so much for hanging with me. I know that this has been a long day for you, and I believe that your lunch is waiting. I also want to say that I'm committed to making sure that you have the information that I just synopsized. I also will leave my email address. Anybody want to talk literacy with me? I'm that geek. Call me up, email, whatever, lunch, coffee, in your office, whatever it takes. Thank you so much.
Let's give it up for Paula White, Dr. Makia, and Dr. Jacobson. I'm going to pivot because I just want to say that you guys have been troopers